Hello, listeners. If you've enjoyed these narrations, please click on that like and subscribe button. I have a great deal of experience with hallucinogenic drugs, from the thousands of hits of LSD that I've taken to the pounds of mushrooms that I've eaten. I've even stopped time on a number of occasions. But that is barely compared to the new hallucinogenic drugs sweeping through our town, which people have simply decided to call Vortex. The reason for its nickname will become apparent. My first experience seeing someone on Vortex was when I was coming home from work and saw a naked homeless man in the middle of the street. I work the night shift in a rural area, often don't leave until 3 or 4 a.m., so needless to say, this caught me by surprise. There's almost never anyone out in the street at night. I'd actually almost hit him with my car. Also, it was the middle of winter and freezing, a combination of sleet and snow raining down from the sky covering the naked man in a layer of icy condensation. But despite all of this, it didn't seem cold at all. In fact, he was visibly sweating and sending off clouds of steam off of his body. His jaw moved rhythmically as if he were chewing on an imaginary wad of gum. As I got out, I saw his eyes staring through me. His pupils dilated so much they covered his entire iris in blackness. At first I said nothing, just staring back at him blankly. Only the sound of sleet and ice hitting my car in the road broke the silence. "Sir, are you okay?" I had asked the man. He'd ignored my question, instead pointing directly behind me. "Do you see those? Do you see them?" he asked in a very low, quavery voice. I hesitated, turning around and leaving myself open to a potential attack from this obviously psychotic individual. But his clear anxiety and fear rapidly changed my mind. On the side of the road, directly behind me, stood what appeared to be a doorway, connecting to absolutely nothing. Iridescent colors formed a catatonic tunnel that zoomed endlessly into the center, fractals connecting and dispersing every moment as I stared into the spiral vortex. I could almost see through it, as if the doorway had the substantiality of a rainbow. But the beings stepping out of the other side of it looked entirely real and solid. They had long antlers branching out from the top of their head, skull-like face shaped like a deer with pieces of rotting skin and fur still attached haphazardly on their bones. Their ribs glistened under the snow and sleet, their claw-like talons extended far beyond their knees. Their skin, well, what remained of it clinging to their bones, reminded me of a survivor from a World War II death camp. The smell of rancid meat and rotting flesh rose from their body in clouds as they trampled towards us, towards at least 10 feet tall. I didn't know what kind of nightmare these monsters had been ripping out of, but now that they were fully into our world, they seemed to smile, their bones on their faces twisting and rancid flesh ripping as they grinned down at me. I knew at that moment, I knew just then I was dead. Even though I stood only 5 feet from my car, they were nearly as close and had much longer strides, as well as freakishly long arms that could reach out and pluck me out at an instant. At that moment, the naked man screamed out in a panicked voice and tried to run past the three of them. They all turned to look at him in the same instant, their unnaturally long arms reaching out and picking him up off the ground as if he weighed much as a feather. They started laughing, a high-pitched, psychotic laugh that echoed and reverberated through the surrounding woods, a sound that was so loud and all-consuming that I felt it vibrating through my heart and ribcage. But my instincts kicked in, and I knew I only had a slim opportunity to escape. I took it, running into my still open driver's door, slamming it shut behind me as fast as I could. My car was still running, sending out clouds of exhaust behind me. I slammed the gear selector into drive as I sent one last glance out in the direction of the homeless man, I saw them rendering him limb from limb while he shrieked in agony. One of them pulled his arm off, separating it as a shoulder and lifting the severed arm into its mouth, letting the blood and veins and arteries pull into its skeletal mouth. The man was still alive as they ripped off his skin and sent them long, forked tongue into his open eyes and screaming mouth. This was all I needed to see. I pounded my foot into the accelerator and took off, the engine of the Ford Taurus revving loudly as the four-wheel drive cut through the slush and the half-melted snow on the road. I heard a sharp, crackling sound behind me, likely one of the creature's claws, but I didn't have time to look back and check. One of them had bounded over and tried to open the driver's side door. Running with the car as I accelerated. But lucky for me, my car automatically locked the doors once you began driving. The monster let go and smashed into the back window with its massive, bony fist. But then I lost them in a matter of seconds as I sped away. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, what'd I do? I said to myself, a vulgar mantra that nonetheless made me feel more grounded. My mind cleared as the adrenaline rush began to wade, leaving me feeling used up and exhausted. I went around a sharp turn and to my great relief couldn't see any of the creatures in my rearview mirror. Taking a deep breath, I centered myself, reaching into my pocket and phone and dialing 911. 911, what's your current location, please? A young female operator said on the other end of the line. Between trembling breaths, I told her. Clearview Lane, at the town view of the Unity in Frenchburg. There's a man, he's dead, on the side of the road. I think he was attacked by... What should I say? Certainly not the truth. No one would believe me unless they had actually seen it for themselves. Grizzly bears, I said quietly. My service began to cut out then, and I could only make out every other word she said. Help. Wait. I heard her say before the call dropped completely. The service was always spotty out here in these rural mountain roads. I drove down the steepy mountain pass through the main valley where downtown lay. On the way, a scenic overlook had a picnic table. All the trees that obscured my view were cut down. Looking over, I had a sudden view of the downtown area of Fredsburg. I saw fires rising up from the buildings in the towering inferno. I could smell the smoke through my car vents. A smell that charred like wood, burning metal and thick smoke. The trees that blocked the view of the town once again, but within a couple minutes I was driving into the center of it. This was, after all, the only road that led to the house I rented on the edge of Fredsburg. Flashing lights from emergency vehicles reflected blind pulses of red and blue light through the dark mountain forest. Something landed heavily on top of my car, and a massive claw hand reached down and smashed my windshield. I started swerving wildly, barely missing a tree on the edge of the road. A dirt driveway was approaching on the left, and I decided to turn sharply, sending the beast on the top of my car flying off. It looked like some kind of hybrid between a gargoyle and kimono dragon. It had green skin that glowed in the dark, illuminating the nearby trees in deep, viridescent hues. Its wings absolutely dwarfed the center mass of its being, spreading out in each direction, 10, 20 feet maybe. It flapped him languidly, landing softly in the dirt driveway, staring at me, looking with an abject fury. It opened its huge mouth and sent out a shriek that sounded like a woman being burned at the stake alive, piercing and seemingly never-ending. My car's headlights were facing in a head-on now. I slammed the accelerator down, hoping to run this ferret beast over. The beast jumped up, but not fast enough, my tires pinning its left wing down. It furiously beat them, trying to rise into the air. Unable to escape, it fell beneath the tires of my vehicle. A shrieking, crackling, resonating sound through the valley as I ran over its spine and chest. I heard rending sounds as its claws and mouth tore at the underside of my carriage and tires. The car quickly stopped working as I drove it forward another few feet, the tires rapidly losing all pressure as steam began to pour out of my engine block. My heart was beating so fast, I felt on the verge of breaking down. More shrieks from across the valley answered the dying cry of the beast as it let out one final defeated scream, then fell silent. I turned the car off, and all I could hear was the ticking of the engine block and the soft patters of sleet against the top of the car. That's when I heard something else, something that made my heart soar with hope. The sound of a human voice. "Hey you, in the Taurus," someone said nearby. I looked down the dirt driveway and saw a person waving their arms furiously in front of one-story blue-white house. I opened the car door, looking down at the flying lizard suspiciously. I had heard many stories of rabid animals who people thought were dead before they picked them up, and the animal had came back to life, tearing them to shreds. There are some species of animals who would play dead as a defense mechanism against predators. I carefully tapped the edge of the wing with my steel-toe boot, and then stomped on it as hard as I could. The creature did not stir, which I took as a signal that it was truly dead. I jumped out of the car and began to jog towards the house. I didn't want to stay out in the open for longer than I had to. As I neared the front porch, I realized the person who had called me was actually an old man. It looked like he was in his 80s, maybe 90s. Tiny wisps of hair grew out on his hawk-like nose, large ears encompassing the side of his face, and his face with a labyrinth of wrinkles and creases. He smiled at me, revealing 2 full sets of steel dentures that shone underneath a dim porch light. I towered over this man. He hunched over with a further dimension to his height. "Well, don't dilly-dally," he said gruffly, looking me up and down. "You know as well as I do that those things are lurking out there. Come on and get inside now, hurry up." He made hand gestures like he was swatting at me. As I went through the door into the house, he slammed it shut behind us, engaging a deadbolt and locking the door. The house smelled of vanilla candles, fresh baked bread, and behind that a musty and dusty odor that I would assume older houses seem to get. It had a knick-knack on every shelf in the wall. The man pushed past me, leading me to the living room lined with bookshelves, thousands of leather-clad, hard-covered books lining the walls on every side. I noticed he had no TV in here. He motioned for me to sit down on the couch and sat next to me on the recliner. That's when he began to speak. "My name is Canton, and what's yours?" "I'm Ryan Kellerman." He nodded gravely at this, which almost made me burst out laughing, as it seemed he was so incredulous to pending details that he was just revealed to. But I contained my mirth inside of myself. Perhaps the shock of the day was just finally getting to me. "Look, Ryan, we have a situation out there." His steel teeth shone ever brighter at the fluorescent light as he spoke. "I would say we do. I saw a man get murdered by something earlier, and there seems to be even more of these somethings all over this place. It's the drug. This vortex crap. I don't know who discovered it, but someone thought it would be fun to use in our little town as guinea pigs and mix it with our illegal drug supply here. This may surprise you, but I'm an ex-FBI. I also spent the decade working with black ops in the US government. The government has called in an agency that most people don't even realize exists. They usually call themselves the Psych Research Agency, or the PRA. While the name might not sound intimidating, they are ruthless killers, torturers and psychopaths of the highest degree. Through my lifelong connection, I was warned that the federal government was surrounding this town, quarantining us from the rest of the country, and that they would soon be sending their goons to execute every single one of us all of the creatures along with us. No one can be left alive who saw the power of the vortex or what it can bring to our world. So what are you telling me? That we're just all dead? I asked, feeling dissociated and oddly calm under the circumstances. Outside the house I could hear sirens and people screaming in the distance, and other sounds that were not human. Not exactly, he said, a small smirk crossing his old, withered face. I put 1 million of doses of vortex in the water supply of this town. You're the reason everything is going to hell outside? I screamed, but he just motioned for me to sit down, calmly waiting for me to stop yelling. It just made me angrier. No, the drug is already here in isolated cases, and the government has been made the call to kill us all when I acted. I found the source and did what I had to do. You have to understand, the agents were already on their way, and the death warrants for every man, woman, and child in this town were signed by that president himself. But if everyone is exposed to the drug, then it will open to countless portals to other parts of the multiverse, let in many other beings who can fight those federal agents. Those beings are literally our only chance. They can kill the executioners that have been surrounding the town, and maybe at least give us some chance to escape. I sighed, sitting back down. If I were to believe what you've said, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm not sure if I do. How do we propose we get out of this town? We can't exactly just walk through the woods and these countless monsters infesting the entire area. His face fell. His expression turned to a frown. Honestly, I haven't gotten that far yet in my planning. I did the only thing possible, at least in my mind. But we just have to try to escape the chaos and take as many innocent people with us as we can. The monsters will begin attacking the lines of agents surrounding the town soon, if they haven't already, and that'll open up a weak point that we can break through. I have plenty of guns here and a working car. He reached underneath his cylinder, pulling out a plastic bag. I have millions more doses of vortex. He shook the bag and I saw the purple crystals inside shedding off sparks and iridescent light as he did so. This drug is activated in doses of millimients of a gram, and to begin working within seconds. It has 100% bioavailable, even absorbed through the skin. We may be able to figure out a way to use the drugs on the agents if everything else fails. At that moment, we began to hear gunshots directly outside the house. A bullhorn was turned on, emitting a loud mechanical shriek for a moment before a voice began to speak. You are surrounded. Come out with your hands raised and we will not harm you. You are under quarantine. I repeat, your house is surrounded. Come out now and surrender. Oh God, it's too late, Carter said. But then he looked up, his expression brightening. Unless what? I asked, feeling sweaty and trapped in the house. I knew we didn't have much time before they broke down the door, and if what he said was true, then they were going to fill us with bullets on the spot. Our only chance is this drug. We have both to take it. We have to open up a doorway and let something in that might be able to fight off those agents and kill them outside. We certainly can't take them agents with the guns and just the two of us. No body armor. We're going to be riddled with bullets in a matter of seconds. It really is our only hope. A rising sense of trepidation increasing my anxiety. I did not want to take this drug. I didn't want to even be near it. I had seen the kind of horrors it had unleashed earlier. Alright. Let's do this now before I lose my courage. He nodded, getting up and rummaging through the desk, pulling out 2 bright blue pills. He gave one to me and kept one for himself. Same time, just chew it up and keep it in your mouth. We don't have time to wait for the capsule lining to dissolve. "Are you ready?" I nodded, and we both popped the capsules in our mouth, chewing them as fast as we could. I could hear the agents moving around outside, getting closer. It sounded like there were dozens of people out there. "This is your last chance," said the man with the bullhorn. "Come out with..." And then his voice deepened and slowed. I couldn't understand it anymore. It sounded like the calls of a blue whale in the ocean, but even deeper than that. Time seemed to have slowed down to a crawl. I looked out the window and saw a water droplet falling. It fell at a snail's pace, seeming to hang suspended in the air by some magical force. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to calm myself using techniques for Buddhist meditation I had learned. I recited a mantra and began to focus on my breathing, imagining pure white light spreading from my heart to the rest of my body. While it didn't fully break the terror, it did help a great deal. When I opened my eyes again, I saw Cantor also had an expression of fear on his face, his bright blue eyes looking frantically around the room as rainbows began to shimmer behind him. 2 doorways materialized at the same time, both standing nearly as tall as the room itself. I stared into the center of the doorway as it crashed in upon itself, the sounds of heavy boots entering the house. We had almost ran out of time. From one portal stepped monsters from some alien world. They were about the size of German shepherds and even walked on all 4, but they were the resemblance of a canine's ended. The skin looked like burning lava and their eyes were just empty sockets of flames dancing within empty orbs. Their mouths hung open, revealing hundreds of sharpened obsidian teeth the size of needles on top and bottom. There were 4 of them, and they seemed to travel as a pack. They regarded us with rage, looking like they were going to spring and tear us both, limb from limb. Luckily at that moment, an agent ran in with his gun raised, his finger on the trigger, and the creatures immediately turned and pounced on him instead. He screamed as his paws burned through the SWAT gear and into his flesh. A smell like roasted pork mixed with burning cloth filled the living room. I took the chance to grab Canton's hand and tried to pull him away from the direction of the open doorway. "We have to go now," I shouted at him, and then I saw what was coming through the other portal. It reminded me of the Hindu god Shiva. It looked like a human being with blue skin who stood 10 feet tall, had 4 arms and a loincloth of some alien leather material covering his waist. In his top right arm he held a silver trident. The other arms all held daggers or swords. His eyes looked like pure white, emitting from his face as he stared directly at me. I knew without a question of a doubt that this was the one that I had summoned. A dozen more federal agents rushed into the room, guns raised, as they weren't even looking for us anymore. They all began shouting in unison as the alien dog and the 4-armed being started to rip them limb from limb, blood pouring everywhere. "We have to go," I told Canton, grabbing his arm and heading towards the kitchen. There was no door in there, but I opened a window, shoving the old man through before jumping through myself. I used my cell phone as a light as we traversed across the forest. There were signs of perimeter being formed, but the dead bodies of the men and women in black SWAT gear all around us showed it had not held against the many monsters released in town. It took everything me and Canton had to scurry our way to his working car with the few guns we had. Eventually, we made it into town, grabbing food from a diner where I'm writing all this down. I'm not sure what we're going to do next, but I know we're heading out of town, north, hoping that the cold will keep the monsters away. If you see any drugs on your street called Vortex, you need to stay far, far away from them, lest you end up like the town of Fredberg.